Coming up on this Monday edition of Daybreak, as reports emerge suggesting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will soon address US Congress. Seoul condemns Tokyo for an annual event promoting Japan's claims to Korea's Dokdo Island. Korean President Park Geun-hye will embark on a four-nation trip to the Middle East next week. Top of her agenda is enhancing cooperation in the energy, construction and IT sectors. Plus, a river ferry capsizes in Bangladesh after being hit by a cargo vessel, killing at least 48 people. It's unclear how many people are missing. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Monday, February 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, Korea has slammed Japan for a ceremony celebrating its erroneous territorial claim to Korea's Dokdo Island, saying the move is historically regressive. In a statement Sunday, a foreign ministry spokesman said the Japanese government's action makes Seoul question the sincerity of Tokyo's pledge to improve their bilateral relationship this year, which marks the 50th anniversary of their since they established diplomatic relations. Japan's Shimane Prefecture promotes its claim to Dokdo every year on February 22nd. The Japanese government sent a vice minister-level official to the ceremony. The third straight year it has sent a senior official to this event. The official falsely claimed Dokdo was an inherent part of Japan's territory under international law. Now, speculation is growing that Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will address US Congress when he travels to Washington later this spring. Sources in Tokyo say congressional leaders are leaning towards approving the move, but it could face some resistance from Korean American groups that say Abe should apologize for Japan's wartime atrocities before he is allowed to give such a high-profile speech. Our Son Jung-in reports.
A source familiar with the issue says Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will likely give a speech before U.S. Congress during his planned visit to Washington in late April or early May. The source said Abe strongly expressed his will to a congressional delegation from the U.S. who recently visited Tokyo. Many U.S. congressional leaders, including House Speaker John Boehner, are known to be leaning toward letting Abe speak to Congress. If Abe gets the green light, it will mark the first time a Japanese prime minister has addressed U.S. Congress in 54 years. Former Prime Minister Hayato Ikeda was the last Japanese leader to give a speech before the House of Representatives all the way back in 1961. Before that, Nobusuke Kishi addressed Congress in 1957 and Shigeru Yoshida in 1954. Abe reportedly wants to speak before a joint session of the lower and upper house, something no Japanese prime minister has ever done before. However, some obstacles stand in his way. Many Korean Americans are opposed to Abe's move as he's expected to promote Japan as a country that has followed a peaceful path since the end of World War II. A task force for a Korean council in Washington for women drafted for military sexual slavery by Japan said they launched a petition campaign on Sunday. They will submit a formal letter to California Congressman Ed Royce saying they're opposed to the idea unless Abe makes a sincere apology over Japan's historical wrongdoings first. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geun-hye has a busy schedule next month as she is planning a 9-day trip to 4 countries in the Middle East starting March 1st. This will be the president's first overseas trip of the year. Her first destination will be Kuwait, followed by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. The presidential office of Cheongwade says President Park will hold summits with the leaders of each nation. The talks are expected to touch on the fields of energy, construction and medicine, as well as security issues on the Korean Peninsula and in the Middle East. Indonesia has invited North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to an international meeting to be held in Jakarta in April. Pyongyang hasn't confirmed Kim's attendance at the Asian-African Conference in Bandung, but South Korean government sources say he is likely to go. If Kim does attend, it would be his first visit to a foreign country since he took power in 2011. Kim's grandfather, the North Korean regime's founder Kim Il-sung, attended this event back in 1965 with Kim's father Kim Jong-il. If Kim Jong-un does go, he could meet with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping at the event. Now, in another sign that North Korea is seeking to bolster its ties with Moscow, latest reports say the North's trade minister is embarking on a week-long trip to Russia. Citing sources in the Russian capital, Seoul-based Yonhap news agency says Lee Yong-nam is expected to arrive in Vladivostok on Monday, and then he's going to travel to Moscow later in the week. It's speculated Lee will discuss the prospects of bilateral economic cooperation with Russian officials. The North Korean minister could also talk about North Korean leader Kim Jong-un possibly attending Russia's World War II commemorative ceremony. That's going to be held in May. The US government says its missile defense capability does not serve the purpose of keeping China in check. The State Department, citing Assistant Secretary for Arms Control Frank Rose, said the US missile defense system aims to defend American territory from attacks involving intercontinental ballistic missiles, but doesn't affect either China or Russia's deterrence. Rose added Washington's ground course missile defense system, a key part of its defense, is actually for countering North Korea and Iran's ICBMs. The comments come after Beijing expressed strong opposition to Washington's interest in deploying its hit-to-kill anti-ballistic missile system, or THAAD system, to the Korean Peninsula. China fears such a move would compromise its strategic security. Now, as people in Korea get back to their day-to-day lives after the 5-day-long Lunar New Year's holiday, thousands of kilometers away in West Africa, there are brave volunteers still fighting the Ebola virus. While Korea's third and final support team begins a new operation on this Monday, back here in Korea, medical staff from the first team have been speaking about their experiences. Our Gwon-sewa reports.
It was a time of fear, sadness, exhaustion, and hope for the Korean medical team that was dispatched to Sierra Leone, one of the 3 West African countries most affected by the, in many cases, deadly Ebola virus. Members of the first Korean team, who are returning to their daily lives after a 3-week quarantine that ended a week ago, recently spoke to reporters about their month-long mission. They said it was a very meaningful experience to have done what they, as ordinary Korean citizens, did. But it didn't come without hardship. They began their day with a routine of putting on their personal protective equipment, which was one of their most crucial tasks.
With the mask, the hood, and the face shield, your whole face feels tight, and hearing your own breath from that close doubles the tension.
But the hardest part by far was letting their patients go.
The first patient I saw die was a little child. That was a shock to me.
But as the team leader said, it was all worth it, as the country needs to upgrade its capacity to deal with epidemics like Ebola.
With Korea's high medical standards for dispatching support teams for treatment and research, I believe we will help in contributing to the global public's health.
The third and final team is scheduled to begin a 1-month mission near Sierra Leone's capital of Freetown on Monday. The number of Ebola cases has been on the decline in recent months, but it's not over yet. The most recent death toll stands at around 9,400 people. Gwon-sewa, Arirang News.
Now to some discouraging news for those looking to get a job this year, as it appears Korean firms aren't likely to recruit many new employees. The Bank of Korea's Employment Business Survey Index stood at 94 at the beginning of the year, the highest it's been in nearly 5 years. The index measures whether companies feel they have enough employees. The higher the number, the more satisfied the firms feel with the current number of their workers. Korea's BSI has been falling since late 2009, but started to pick up again last year. More than a third of Korea's largest firms by sales say they will hire a combined 22,000 new employees this year. That's down 2.3% from a year earlier. Now, Chinese tourists visiting Korea, and they're coming here in ever larger numbers, and generally they spend quite a lot of money during their stay. So the Korean government is stepping up efforts to accommodate them, including plans to build resort complexes equipped with casinos. For this week's Industry Insight, our Kim Ji-yeon takes a look at the challenges and rewards for Korea's casino industry.
Will the opening of resort complexes, equipped with hotels, shops, and casinos, bring investment and boost the economy? The Korean government is betting it will. It believes it can raise $1.8 billion from the casino industry. Now it's letting Korean companies get in on the bidding, a privilege once reserved for foreign investors. Just last month, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance gave the green light to the development of 2 additional foreigner-only casino and resort complexes in the country's free economic zones. It plans to select the 2 licensees by 2020. Already, the country has attracted investors for 2 complexes on Dokdo Island located in the western city of Incheon. The Korea-based Paradise Group and the multinational casino firm Caesars Entertainment Corporation are each building a resort complex there. Both are seeking to be the Korean version of Singapore's Marina Bay Sands, which raised $5.4 billion in sales last year. But challenges lie ahead if they're to survive in the competition against the massive casino and resort complexes in Macau and Okinawa. But mainly, there's the China risk factor. The income of casinos in Korea is heavily reliant on visiting Chinese tourists. That's because the Korean government currently bans its nationals from all casinos except one. The casino in northeastern Gangwon-do province is the only one Korean nationals can go to. The other 16 casinos rely on those with foreign passports. The tourism ministry says the combined sales of foreigner-only casinos is at around $1.2 billion, similar to the sales at the casino in Gangwon-do.
The restriction placed on Korean nationals will affect the competitiveness of the Korean casino industry. The scale and amount of investment in the resort complexes is going to be smaller than in other neighboring countries.
Korea is capping investments in its complexes at $900 million a year, a figure far below that of its rivals. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping is increasingly trying to root out gambling as part of an anti-corruption campaign. That has raised fears the Chinese government will restrict its nationals from gambling, both home and abroad. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines. We're following this Monday morning from Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. New this morning, a ferry has capsized in Bangladesh, killing at least 4 dozen people on board. Authorities say the ML Mosta was traveling on the Padma River Sunday afternoon when it was hit by a cargo vessel some 40 kilometers northwest of the capital of Dhaka. Emergency crews recovered recovered 48 bodies by Sunday evening. It is not clear how many people were aboard, as ferries in Bangladesh do not typically keep formal passenger lists. One official put that estimate at 140 people. Rescue operations do continue as heartbroken family members mourn the passage of their loved ones. Bangladeshi police said they've arrested the captain and the 2 crew members of the vessel. Hundreds of Turkish forces were sent into northern Syria over the weekend in a preemptive move to remove the remains of a historic tomb amid threats by the Islamic State group that it would strike it. The tomb holds the remains of Suleiman Shah, the grandfather of the founder of the Ottoman Empire. The 9-hour operation began Saturday evening and was completed by Sunday morning. Ankara said it evacuated the remains and its 38 honor guards to an area closer to the border from what it considers to be sovereign territory. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government called the operation a flagrant aggression. Meanwhile, the Islamic State group has released a new propaganda video, this time showing 21 caged men in orange jumpsuits, who it says are Kurdish Peshmerga forces. A man in the video in Kurdish calls on fighters to give up their struggle against IS or face a fate in a cage or, quote, under the ground. And a peace rally in Ukraine was struck by a bomb attack, leaving at least 2 people dead and several others wounded. Emergency workers and residents of Kharkiv rushed to help the wounded, which struck the biggest city in eastern Ukraine, which had come under firm government control. The peace rally held across Ukraine was to mark 1 year since the uprising that ultimately toppled the Russia-backed government of Viktor Yanukovych. This was the first prisoner swap. The first prisoner swap was marked over the weekend between pro-Russia separatists and government forces since the second ceasefire came into effect 1 week ago.
Well, thank you very much, Eunice, for the international news there. Now, as we enter a brave new era of technological advances, US researchers have developed a robot that is outfitted with systems that can simulate human physiology. The robot's intended use is to help with things like chemical spills and other life-threatening situations. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The international box office smash Transformers paints a world where massive robots from outer space come to take over the Earth. These robots move and run just like humans and engage in combat. Coming up with real robots, looking anything close to this, would mean developing complex artificial robot limbs. The limbs imitate human muscles, creating more flexibility. If pulled, the limb stretches, and when you let go, it contracts. This robot uses a rubber tube system, which means that when air is blown in, it contracts, and it stretches when the air is let out. The US Navy and the University of California have jointly developed such a robot. Although it's in the early stages, its developers hope the robot could eventually be used to rescue people from fires or other disaster areas.
The robots can move freely like humans. They also have metal-based muscle and skeletal systems. They are able to move almost as naturally as humans.
Korean firms are jumping into the robot market as well. Some experts say that within a few years, robots like the ones seen in Transformers might not be science fiction, but science fact. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Every field has a pioneer or a legendary figure. For Korean folk music, that person is the late Ji Young-hee. Ji steadfastly guarded, updated and promoted Korean folk music during Japan's colonial rule of Korea and even made inroads into Europe and America. Now Kim Min-ji has a story.
What you're listening to is the Haegum Sanjo, a genre of folk music involving the traditional Korean string instrument Haegum. A master of the genre was Ji Young-hee, who was referred to in Korea as the father of Korean folk music. It may not be a familiar name, but Ji, who is honored in his country as an intangible cultural asset, is considered a legendary figure who made great contributions to Korean music. Born in 1909, Ji spent most of his life preserving and developing folk music.
Ji Young-hye created jobs for musicians who were mistreated at the time and helped foster an environment for them to be respected. And if it hadn't been for his efforts to transcribe the music, Korean folk would never have existed.
Ji also took his passion to the international level. Through performances in Europe and America, including at Carnegie Hall in 1964, he was able to demonstrate the excellence of traditional Korean music.
Ji Young-hye had a dream in disseminating our traditional folk music to the people in America and across the world. When he first went to France and he did a traditional performance, the people there, the coordinators, they were just overwhelmed with the music, and they actually complimented them, saying that your music exceeds our Western music and it is even greater than ours.
He also modified the instruments to create a larger range of tones, just like the ones that are still used today. His keepsakes, from his bicycle and passport to his manuscripts, are still preserved, and his works are still performed and loved to this day by Koreans and non-Koreans alike.
I'm enjoying the performance very much. It's beautiful music. It is very different from Western music, but it's interesting to hear.
Today, the members of his family, some of the musicians themselves, are living proof of Ji's achievements, and they have since taken up the mantle of promoting the uniqueness of traditional Korean folk music. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off in the LPGA, where the Koreans were looking for their third straight victory to start off the new season, going into the final round of the ISPS Honda Women's Australian Open on Sunday. But let's just say it's not 3 straight, but 2.5, if that makes any sense, as teenage sensation and Korean New Zealander Lydia Ko holds on to her lead, shooting a 9 under par overall, including an eagle in the final hole to clinch her first victory of the season. And with the latest win, it's already her 6th title of her career, as Amy Yang comes oh so close for the Koreans in their bid for their 3rd straight, as she finishes 2 strokes behind Lydia Ko in 2nd place. Now, if Lydia Ko was making all the noise in Australia, Pittsburgh Pirates' Kang Jungho was doing just the same over in Florida, where his team's currently preparing for their new season. And after batting practice over the weekend, expectations, well, higher than ever. Now, a lot of thumbs up and nice swing Jungho comments during his latest batting practice, where the former Nixon hero sent most of his swings deep, including 2 that went over the wall. Now, what was impressive about the swings was that the wind was blowing in, preventing many of the balls to go deep, yet he was on par with some of the big swingers on the team like Andrew McCutchen. Now, Kang also showed that he can spread the ball around, hitting to all parts of the field during practice. Now, while Kang Jungho is enjoying a nice spring training with the Pittsburgh Pirates, former Kia Tigers ace Yoon Sangmin is training on his own at the Boris Corporation, as all signs point to his major league career coming to an end even before it started. Now, with Orioles manager Buck Showalter leaving him off the spring training roster, he was instead included in the minor league camp. But the righty decided to refuse the invitation and has been training on his own, hoping for a last-minute invite to the Orioles spring camp. Now, if Yoon Sangmin isn't invited, chances are he'll never step onto the major league mound and possibly return to Korea. Now, ever since the 2012 London Summer Games, Korea has been on fire when it comes to fencing competitions. And with the 4th stage of the FIE Fencing World Cup taking place over the weekend in Poland, Kubong-gil continued his dominance, beating Romania's Tiberiu Doniceu 15-8 to claim the gold medal. Now, with the gold medal finish, he also takes 32 points in the latest world rankings and is the top-ranked fencer in the men's single saber with 240 points. And with that said, that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, yellow dust blanketed the whole peninsula. It reached an unhealthy level in most parts today. And even the first yellow dust warning of the year has been issued for Seoul, Incheon, and Gyeonggi-do province, an advisory for the rest of the peninsula. So be sure to have a protective mask with you before heading out and try to be indoor if possible. I mean, it hit over 800 micrograms per cubic meter since 4 a.m. this morning for the upper provinces, and it's only going up higher. So the yellow dust will continue to sweep throughout the day. So again, try not to be outdoor and avoid any outdoor activities. And temperature-wise, the morning lows are kicking off at -3 this morning, and that's 7 degrees lower than yesterday, but afternoon highs will be similar to yesterday. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. So the daily low here in Seoul is kicking off at -3, then the high will climb up to 5, while the top temperatures in Daegu and Busan will rise to 10 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Dokdo Island and Daejeon should see a high of 9 and 7, and Dokdo will hit at 8. Well, stay safe, everyone, and that's all for the weather.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather. And that is going to do it for now. Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour. Have a great day, and do stay tuned to Arirang TV. Goodbye.